Good morning, everybody. Far and wide. Yes, we're here. We're live. It's Thursday morning. Wow, this week has just gone like that. Central.com. It is the second day of the new month of September, and spring is here, and it's light.
Whoop, whoop.
You can actually see outside. You don't need all the lights to be on. You know, you can. I think I see just a faint glow on the horizon of the sun. So it's
And you
starting.
can hear the happiness of the birds.
You can hear the happiness of the birds, Pums. Is that it?
Jeez,
Nice.
the birds are going wild out there.
The birds, they're busy this time of year because they're making more birds. I wonder if, so many of my friends have birthdays in September. August and September. I mean, mine is then as well. So if I just take it back to when we must have been conceived, those of us who
December
were born.
babies.
Yeah, correct. So we were all born when our parents were having their summer holidays or New Year's Eve parties or whatever it might have been, right? That's when we were born. We were conceived, rather, and born 9 months later. So there are a ton of birthdays. For me, this is like birthday central. I've got one after the other, after the other, after the other. And the problem is that those numbers are increasing. So they're going from like people who were turning 25, 30, 35, 40. Now they're getting to almost the 45 category.
40, 45. 40.
Old now. 40, 45? 40, 45? No. 45. Anyway, morning, everybody.
Old.
Old. Well, yes. I mean, yeah, listen. So on Monday night, it was Monday night, Tuesday night, I got a call from a friend of mine's sister. She said, your friend just died in hospital. Yeah, 38 years old, Phumi. And she was, I mean, listen, she drank a lot, she partied hard, she lived a rock star life. But 38, hey, that's young. That's young. And
Yeah.
she's the first of our kind of inner circle. It wasn't COVID, by the way, because everybody's asking that. But she's the first of our close circle of friends who we were friends with at varsity, like 22 to 25 years ago. She was the first one of that group to go. And yeah, it makes things a little more jarring and frightening and in your
It
face.
stops you, hey? It
Gee.
does. It stops you. It makes you go, what?
Mm.
The mortality. Because when you're young, you think you'll live forever. When you're young, it's like immortality is a real thing.
Right, and I've been in that cloud for a long time now. I've been like, please, I'm gonna live forever. This life thing is not going to get me down. And I do. I still wake up happy. You know, I'm taking it a lot less hard than some of my friends because I think some of them have just come to terms with that now. And I mean, luckily, you know, I've got friends who are really. I do have friends in their 80s, and I have friends in their late 20s, and you know, between them, you get a good kind of perspective of what's going on in the world because they're very different. And I mean, Mbulelo says that he is not into Donda, so he's realized like he must be an old man as well now. And that's a scary realization because you how old are you now?
35.
Yeah, so if you don't know Donda, then you're an old man. Sorry, I hate to break it to you.
Is it if you don't know Donda or if you don't have the time to listen to all 27 tracks?
If you were 24, you would probably make time to listen to Donda. It would be a priority. It's not a priority to him anymore. And for those people who don't know what the hell we're talking about, because there are going to be a lot of those too, we're talking about Kanye West's new album, which, you know, there was a time where I knew exactly what Kanye West was up to because I was fascinated by this guy. And for better or for worse, I liked a lot of his music. So, you know.
So it was.
Maybe I'm old.
So here's the thing, though. After that concert, listening session he had at the stadium, where everybody sat around like watching him jam to his. I was just like, okay, guy, okay. And then when it came out and there were like 27 tracks, I was like, okay, I can wait. I don't have the, because isn't it, that's the thing about listening to a new album, right? You have to listen to it from start to finish, so you can like take, and also the sequence within which the songs are on the album. You have to listen to the whole thing in its entirety, and then make up your mind on whether you like it or what songs you like. You can't just like, because we don't get music like kind of on the radio like we used to, where the radio would give you the number one hit and give you, you know, so it's just 27 songs though, hey? 27.
That's a lot to get through. So that's how you know, Mbulelo. That's how you know you're old, because you don't give a shit about Kanye's new album.
Well, it's not even that. The guys in the studio came in and they were talking about Drake's new album. I don't know what that's going to be called, but anyway, they said the name, and I said, "Oh, is that a new series?" And I think they thought I was joking. You know, like everyone in the office was like, "Oh, you," and they're like, "No, that's Drake's new album that's coming out." Although I did see, I did see that one of my favorites, Damien Hirst, designed the cover. Oh. So that's pretty cool.
Sure,
I saw that. I love Damien Hirst.
Did Drake just break up with someone? Because that's his, isn't that his kind of?
Oh, is that his thing?
You have this girlfriend and it's all great and love is like, life is all wonderful, and then breaks up and then fire album because he's so heartbroken.
It's like Adele with a tan.
Is there any music at the moment that you're really paying attention to though? Because that whole thing, as Phumi says, has changed too. Like I used to be on top of this stuff. You know, it was part of my job. It was also part of what I loved. Like I've still got alphabetized CD collection in this house. It's ridiculous. I said to somebody the other day, I'm never going to listen to those CDs. They're never going to be listened to. I don't even know if I've got a CD player anymore.
Because where are you going to play them?
Right.
Why do you have CDs?
I know, but what am I going to do with them? Do you know how much money I spent I used to take hard-earned cash when I was in my early 20s. You know, this was money that I'd worked for, you know. This was stuff that I'd saved up, and I would go to the record store, and I would buy a bunch of my favorite albums from my favorite musicians. Maybe if I was on a real spending spree, I'd buy 3 at a time, you know, and it was like, whoa. I mean,
that was like $600 back in the day for that.
These motherfuckers who are just going off to the shop now on their own computer and like buying an Apple subscription and getting every song on earth, they have no idea of the pain that we all went through.
Or
and
just the
dedication. Yeah, well, the joy, but the dedication.
The joy of being inside a reliable music warehouse and going through the CDs, going through one by one, and then asking them to play the CD.
The first time you ever went to one of those big ones overseas, because we had big ones in this country, but we had nothing compared to those Virgin mega stores that they had on Times Square and on the high street in London, where it was like acres and acres of music. Oh man. Anyway, we sound like old people, but the fact is, like, I can't get rid of this stuff. I cannot bring myself to throw away, you know, the 10 AC/DC albums or the Tony Braxton "You're Making Me High" single from 1997. I can't throw it away. I cannot get rid of it. It makes me sad to think that I'm going to have to just fill a box and just put it out with the trash, because no one wants them, right? Nobody's looking for these things. And for me at the time, it was part of my identity, man. It made me who I was. I was nobody if I didn't have those songs.
But you know what is wonderful about having like the entire library of all music ever made on your phone is you get to also discover new stuff. You know, I absolutely love the fact that when you've been listening to a couple of things and then Apple suggests someone you might like, and sometimes it's someone you would never have like even thought of, and you listen and then you're just like, or when they tell you who was influenced by whom and all of that.
Yeah.
Although I still listen to Bob Marley.
Oh man, you see, there's something that I wouldn't throw that away. I know it's just I'm hoarding. No, I'm hoarding shit, and there's going to be a point in my life sometime where I go, okay, now you got to start cleaning up. but that day has not come yet. So don't expect me to be throwing this stuff out yet. And Bob Marley's not going anywhere. I don't care if people laugh at me. Where are you going to play that album, you idiot? I don't care. It's mine. It's mine. The cover art, you just mentioned Damien Hirst doing the cover of the album. Now, listen, some of these albums, they put more effort into the album cover than they did into the songs.
Did you see the thing about that Nirvana, that the guy who's the
mind,
Nirvana baby, who's all grown up now?
Yeah, we spoke about it yesterday.
Did you? God,
yeah.
That's
What do you think? What do you think of that? He's just an opportunist, second to none, because he was taking pictures of himself and selling those at every stage of his life for money. You know, like he realized he was the Nirvana kid, and he was making a ton of money. Now suddenly he's got a problem with sexual exploitation.
My God.
Do me a favor. What an asshole.
Alrighty then, you feel that strongly.
No, I mean, where was he complaining about this when he was, 15, 20 years ago? He was selling his own image as an emancipated adult. He was selling his own image for, on posters and on T-shirts and everything else. He didn't have a problem with it. Now suddenly he's got a problem? Please.
Emancipated adult.
A wise man can always change his mind.
Robin says, Mbulelo, you look 25. And then she asks, how old am I? So I turned 44 this year. I feel good about 44 though, so I'm not even embarrassed to admit it. I used to say I was either a little bit older or a little bit younger, but now I just tell people straight up. So thanks, Robin. I'm not phased. If people think I look a good 44, then that's great. If they think I look a shit 44, then well, I've got to work harder, right? And we were talking about this the other day. Like you get a good 50, you get a good 60, and then you get a really bad one. And I'll be damned if I'm going to be one of the bad ones.
And that's a choice, by the way. I don't want anyone saying I'm aging bad. You can choose in your 30s. You choose what you look like at 50. So no excuses.
All right. I spent my life in mega stores in London. Robin also says, and then the old songs don't have much swearing and f-bombs. They're so kid friendly. Well,
because they used to be on the radio.
Yeah, but some of them, because you always used to get on the albums, you would also get the non-radio version. Like that's where I learned. I remember it was a big deal when I was a kid. Now I'm gonna show you some cred here. There was Two Live Crew. Okay, Two Live Crew.
Oh wow!
These were rappers, like proto rappers in the time of Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac, and like I don't know how many
Miami school.
Right. I don't know if any of the white people in this country even knew who Two Live Crew were, but I could say that stuff. They had a thing called Dirty Nursery Rhymes. Do you ever remember that, Pums? Mama Bear and Papa Bear went for a walk through the forest. Mama Bear asked Papa Bear, could he eat her porridge? Papa Bear says, shit, bitch, you must think I'm sick. So get down here on your knees and suck this badass dick. Yeah. I remember that shit. They were filthy.
Wow. Yeah, no, that gives you cred. It gives you cred that you knew Two Live Crew.
I'm not going to go into all of them, but Two Live Crew were amazing, and they were before rap was meant to be like dirty. Rap was just great rhyming, and there was almost a gentility about it at the time. And then these guys came along and they were like, screw that, we're going to be as foul and dirty as we can. They wrote a song just about blowjobs. It was awesome. And Abraham Lincoln was a good old man. He jumped out the window with the dick in his hand. He said, excuse me, lady, I'm doing my duty, so pull down your pants and give me some booty.
That's awesome.
There's a really great podcast about Two Live Crew's kind of rise and fall.
I knew these guys because at school, this is primary school for me. Don't ever let people tell you that kids are innocent, decent, and they're never exposed. I mean, like I was exposed to this stuff in the 1980s when we had cassette tapes. And there was no way to play a cassette tape quietly to yourself. You either had to put it on the one cassette player in the house, which belonged to your dad, and you were only allowed to use that when he was around. And I just knew I was going to be in shit, but I still found those tapes. There were three of us, me and my two mates, we were into this stuff. Like we thought this was the coolest music we'd ever heard in our lives. So I just loved it. And I would, I knew all the words. I knew them off by, I can still recite them now for, shits and giggles. So this just shows you. Anyway, Mbulelo, if you're in a 35 and in shape, says Robin, you are set for life. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that Mbulelo's onto something there. And Ariella says, kid-friendly. My 7-year-old singing along to Venga Boys and Barbie Girl, listening to it as an adult is completely different.
That is hilarious.
The Venga Boys and Barbie Girl. Oh my God. What a shit song.
So I wanted to ask you before we move on. I mean, so you lost a friend. Has that sort of, are you the type of person to take it on board and think, oh, I got to do some epic stuff now? Because I lost someone incredibly close. I mean, I'm pretty hyperactive anyway in general, but I'm definitely getting back into doing more epic stuff. Or are you the type of person to just, it's sad, let's move on, I'm living my life how I'm living it?
I don't carry much regret around with me. You know this, right?
Sure.
So I'm not. The last time I saw her, we had a big reunion party, which I actually talked about on this show. It was in May of this year, and we were all together. And there were 2 of my friends from America here, one of my friends who lives down on the south coast of KZN, and one of our other friends from Cape Town. And we were all together at my house, and we had a huge big party, and it was like good old times. And she was here, and she had fun just with the rest of us. And if that was, and that was the last time I saw her. So that was 3-4 months ago, and amazing. I wouldn't have had there's no better goodbye than that. So no regrets. I think that this person was sent to Earth for a good time, not for a long time. And I think she had that. So I'm not one of those people who's sitting there going, oh, gone too soon. You know how these people, when someone dies, they make it about them. And I'm trying really hard not to make it about me, because I think about how horrible it must be for a parent. And her parents are both still alive. Any parent to lose a kid's the worst thing ever, right? That is the hardest thing. There is nothing worse than that. And if you're a parent who's lost a kid, you're the only one who knows how that feels, and no one can ever really get how that feels for you. So I don't know how that is. I think about her parents quite a lot since I heard the news. I reckon everything's temporary. Everything around us. Eventually there won't be any trace in like 10,000 years that any of the 3 of us were ever here. Me, Phumi, and Mbulelo.
It's tragic that we don't know how to measure forever, because genetically, and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts on this, is genetically we're only driven for about 100 years, give or take, is sort of where they are. Is we don't know what forever.
Right.
Go ahead.
We have no concept of anything beyond 100 years. 100 years does feel like forever to us. Beyond that, we're like,
and it's nothing.
No, and then they also say to you,
once, by the way.
And they say to you that after 2 generations, people stop visiting your grave. So, maybe your grandchildren, and then if you have any grandchildren, maybe a slight chance that your great-grandchildren will give a damn that you ever existed or know something about your life. But beyond that, forget it. Yeah, you just become part of the earth. A big, long story. And maybe if you've really made history, like the 0.00001% of people who make history, then you'll live a bit longer than that. But that doesn't worry me.
Like the Isaac Newtons.
Yeah.
Or you can shoot a president.
Yeah, you could do something notorious, or you could do something amazing. And that's really how you live forever. And I'm obsessed with this stuff, like mortality. It bothers me that I don't have forever, because I like living. And I'm not, when something like this happens, it doesn't put me off the joy of living at all. And I don't get hugely introspective, and it doesn't bother me. Like, I know some of my friends are taking it very hard, and it doesn't mean that I don't feel it as deeply as they feel when something like this happens. But I'm not obsessed with it, and I don't dwell on it. And I do feel like if I did, it would be about me and not about her. And I've got to move on, because either she's in a better place, if you believe in that, or she's oblivious. But either way, she's better off than any of us. So don't make it about you.
I'm interested to know, Mbulelo, do you get intense about living after you've lost someone? Is that what it is?
No, I think I'm intense anyway because I do focus on how short 80 years is nothing. Like I want to do as much as possible, and I probably have another 10 years of being able to really do it. Like after 45, I don't care who you are, it starts to hurt everywhere. I'm all about quality of life. And
Starts to hurt everywhere.
yeah,
No,
well, I mean, am I lying?
A little bit of respect. A little bit of respect, Mbulelo.
You can't run a marathon like you did in your 30s, but there are people who are running marathons in their 60s and 70s. Now, if you're going to run a marathon, you're going to choose to do it. That's because the hurt can be overcome by the joy that you get out of it. Otherwise,
but here's what I'm saying.
You run in the mornings. You see these old men and women who are running. You know what I'm talking about. So don't say by 40 it's all pain and anguish.
No, well, so look, I could do 100K trail run at 25, and I did one at like 31. It's not the same. It hurts more at 31, which means the quality of the experience. Like I can't go to Patagonia at 45 and do what I did when I was 25. A solo mission for 3 days by myself. Like at 25, whatever, the next day you're up and you go. At 45, and that's quality of life for me. I want to be able to push it to the limit. Your quality of life might look different. And I'm not saying better or worse. It just looks different. I always think of it that way, you know?
Okay. But
Annette says, there you go, Mbulelo. Annette says she's 53 and nothing hurts.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So that was a little ageist and yeah.
Beth says Mike Rowe's mom published a book at 80, not super physical, yet an accomplishment. I mean, yeah,
Absolutely.
You know, the people who are still running businesses in their 80s. Barry Smith says, what you're referring to is our second death. It's the last time someone speaks or thinks of you after you're dead. Yeah, I think that came up on the show the other day. Like, your second death is when the last person who actually knew you goes. Then the last living memory of you is gone. You never know when that's going to happen because you'll be long
You're gone.
Yeah, right.
It's true. It's true. You're very dead at that stage.
And Mbulelo, don't let your own words set you up for a miserable future. That's some good advice from Michael there. Yeah, and you know, I mean, there's a lot to be said for knowing yourself and getting used to your body and getting used to your own mind and advancing in wisdom, because you also, I think you know your body better at 40 than you did at 30 and at 20. You know what you can tolerate. You know how to push yourself safely. You know, in your 20s, you just take risks. You just do like dumb shit to yourself. You fall and you break things, and you don't seem to have as much respect for your body as you do later on.
But you also find joy in different things.
Yes,
absolutely.
So when you're in your 20s, it's really great to get like shit-faced and dance till 5 a.m. and then sleep till noon. That's, you know what I'm saying? That's joy.
That's priority.
But as you grow older, you find joy in different things, and they look different.
And to that point, that's tough, is to shed that skin. I mean, one of my heroes, Dorian Yates, is like a great example, right? So he was like Mr. Olympia, crazy guy back in the day. And then he's like now he's all about functional. Like he's 60, yoga, that's unbelievable shape. So he evolved, and that's maturity. I'd like to be that, you know?
Yeah, that's an evolution. That's the sensible way to behave. So a couple of things, because we've got to get to headlines in a second, but I want to tell you about this because it's something new that we're doing, and you might be interested in this. Imagine opening your dream business after years of struggling, and then a global pandemic threatens to shut it all down. So I mentioned this the other day when we were talking to Yaku from Tech, and presented by the one and only Boya Arnold. You can find out how the Business Partners Limited COVID Relief Initiative made it possible for 2 entrepreneurs to take their dreams and make them come true, and to help their businesses survive through the COVID-19 lockdown. Business Partners Limited, you can look them up, has provided specialized business finance for over 40 years. If you're an established entrepreneur, you can apply today to obtain finance for your business from $500,000 to 50 million rand that is tailored to your individual requirements. So This is such handy stuff, especially for people who are struggling with cash flow at the moment. Get these inspirational stories and more about Business Partners Limited by going to cliffcentral.com or wherever you listen. And of course, Hlubi is very well known to everyone on the Cliff Central platform. She's one of those people who just is unbelievably positive and optimistic. You meet Hlubi anywhere, she just hugs and kisses and love, and she's the most optimistic person I know. So if there's anyone who's going to be able to help these business people who've had a tough year because of 2 years as it is now because of COVID, Hlubi's the one to host these shows. It's terrific. You can find out more by going to cliffcentral.com, or you can go to Business Partners Limited, and wherever you listen, there are a bunch of really, really interesting episodes for you to take a listen to. That is Business Partners Limited COVID Relief Initiative, and there's money up for grabs there too if your business needs it. Sounds like a good deal because it is, and this is what we need. Remember that 80-year-old lady, Julia, who drove from Cape Town to London in a Toyota Taz, says Carol.
No.
I don't remember.
What?
Do you remember that?
No.
Wow, good for her. I didn't know about that story.
I hope it had aircon.
And I hope it will. I mean, in winter it would have been tough, but in summer it might have been even tougher, right?
That's incredible.
They're near the equator.
Yeah.
Hot and humid. Ooh.
That is incredible.
Do you want to hear some headlines this morning? You want to know what's going on in the world? Let's take a look. First things first, Piers Morgan, who you remember stormed off of Good Morning Britain. Well, Ofcom, who are like the Broadcasting Complaints Commission, or ICASA of Britain, have cleared ITV over Piers Morgan's Meghan comments on Good Morning Britain. This is interesting because remember, Meghan wrote herself to the head of the network to complain about Piers. Well, ITV has been cleared by media regulator Ofcom, which has rejected a record 58,000 complaints. Good. I think complaints should be rejected. The ex-Good Morning Britain host said he didn't believe what Meghan Markle said in her Oprah Winfrey interview in March. The Duchess herself filed complaints. Little precious snowflake. Ofcom said restricting his views would be a chilling restriction on free expression, but criticized his apparent disregard for the subject of suicide. Morgan said he was delighted with the ruling. Of course he was. Smug ass. Which he described as a resounding victory for free speech and a resounding defeat for Princess Pinocchio.
You know what? I disagree with about.
You know whose side I'm on, right?
No, listen, I disagree with about 95% of Piers's actual opinions, but he's so important for society, especially in Britain, is that we have to learn. Just because you disagree with somebody, it doesn't mean you must make them go away. Like he's so important and we're getting softer and softer and softer as a society. Shout out Piers. He's so important.
I love when all these people who think that they can cancel other people get a slap in the face from the authorities, because these days we seem to think that because we have a voice on Twitter, people need to listen to us. Just because you have a voice doesn't mean anyone's listening. And these 58,000 people who complained about Piers Morgan.
And you know what Piers is still a good reminder of? It's that if you're brilliant, they'll hire you. Because he's actually 90% of the world cannot stand the sight of him, but CNN will probably give him another job, and they'll keep hiring Piers. I think he's brilliant. What he is brilliant.
He's been resting on a number of offers for the last couple of months. He's making no moves in a hurry, and I wouldn't be surprised if ITV even are empowered by what they've just, because their ratings have plummeted since he left. Right, they put on all the rest of the team that they thought would be able to hold the audience, and that audience has just bled right out. So I think they're at a quarter of the audience that they had while Piers was there. So he's good, and as you say, Mbulelo, when you're good, then they can try and fire you, they can move you around, but ultimately the business of what you do is going to remain valuable. And I just love it. Here's this guy who speaks his mind. He doesn't even mind standing up to powerful Hollywood-backed royalty. I mean, if there's any elite in the world, it's got to be this marriage between royalty and Hollywood royalty. Like that's the most rarefied air you can breathe. And this little precious princess, Meghan Markle, and her useless loser of a husband, Prince Harry, these two guys have got to be ignored. Just like all the people who complained on their behalf had to be ignored. So what? We hurt your feelings. We don't believe Meghan Markle. Well, guess what? We don't believe a lot of people in the world. And there's no amount of propaganda that you can throw at us to make us believe those people. So stick it in your grandma. How about that? Hey, we were talking about NWA and 2 Live Crew earlier. Don't think I'm being rude.
You're just keeping the tone. Yeah, you're holding the tone. It's continuity in our business.
Yeah, Mara, grandmothers, come on, guys. Grandmothers, I'm sensitive, hey? I'm sensitive.
I know, it wasn't too long, hey, Pums. I mean, your grand's he just left us. All right. The pink vote is apparently an untapped market in South Africa for votes. So listen to this. This is interesting to anyone who takes a mild interest in politics, and even to those of us who are going to be talking about the burning platform later. This might be interesting. A recent report by the Institute of Race Relations, and we've had them on a couple of times, on voting preferences in the LGBTQIA plus population. Can you believe I got all those letters right?
I think you missed something. Say it again.
LGBTQIA.
What's
plus.
A?
Asexual, believe it or not.
But why can't we just do plus? Isn't plus everything? Like LGBT plus. There we go. We've covered all of the.
Have you seen they've redone the flag? There's a new pride flag, and it's the most hideous looking thing you've ever seen. So it's the old pride flag, the rainbow. But now it's got a triangle like the South African flag that comes in from the left. But that has got brown in a flag. Brown and light blue, then dark blue, and then pink. And it's like a rainbow cake, but where the icing is bled into the rainbow cake, and it's been sitting in the sun for 3 days. And
it's not soft and spongy.
No, it looks terrible. If anyone's proud of this flag, I would be surprised. It's really shit.
You've just brought an interesting thought to me. Sorry, is who decides who can change a flag? Like I've never known. Like is there a panel of people? Is it some douchebags in like a meeting? How does it work?
Are you talking about a national flag? Because
or like any flag. Like who decided? Did all the sort of community of the LGBTQI plus
was there a consultative process?
No, yeah. That's just a mess of opinions. That's probably like a high school popularity contest system. But the way that it's meant to be done, like our flag was designed by our Bureau of Heraldry. We've got a national herald who is a guy called Thabo Maseko, I think. And he is our national herald. He sits in an office in Pretoria, and he is in charge of all the national symbols. Flags, by the way, the study of flags is called vexillology, and it's an offshoot of heraldry, which is a way of identifying. Funnily enough, I'm wearing this today, so there's like a hoodie, but it's like a coat of arms. So that kind of thing was, and we've got Heritage Day this month, so this is all very appropriate. The Bureau of Heraldry's job is to create rules for the national symbols, because the flag is a symbol of the country. That's why you're meant to treat it with respect. It's meant to be raised.
Like a brand.
Right. Raised during the day, taken down during the night, flown at half mast when someone very important dies. It's a sign of the country giving respect and the country getting respect. So if you respect your country, you respect your flag. And even people who are not particularly thrilled with the government of the day in any country, they still respect the symbols of that country because they feel some kind of attachment to the values of that country and to the things that that country stands for. Anyway.
Hence things like burning the flag.
Right. It's this ultimate rebellion, right? That's the ultimate rebellion against the country, or showing your complete hatred and dislike of the country is to burn the flag. And there are rules around these things. You can't put, for example, yellow and white are considered metals and all the others are considered colors. And you don't ever put a color on a color or a metal on a metal. And there's certain rules about this that come from like 1300 and have worked out very well, because what they've been designed to do is they're not just arbitrarily made. They're meant to make the symbols show properly, display properly, so that you can identify them from a long way away. I mean, you can see the South African flag. Your eyes are usually drawn to it because you know what to look for, right?
Mm.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's bold. Yeah.
Anyway, when it comes to the LGBTQIA plus flag. Nobody knows how that's designed. It's made up on the spot probably. But the point isn't the flag. We were talking about the story. And the story is that South Africa has
There's a pink vote.
Pink vote. Did you believe this? And it's that population may be a much larger voting bloc than expected. And it was possible for political parties from different ideological viewpoints to compete for support of the LGBTQIA plus voters. It's found that this group tend to be more politically engaged than other demographic groups. Gerbrand van Heerden, who's the author of the report, said if political parties continue to ignore this community, they risk missing out on an active, dynamic, and electorally valuable market. So studies conducted by the Other Foundation have found, that's called the Other Foundation, it's actually a group of people, have shown that conservative estimates place that population, the pink vote, at 500,000 people. That means that there are potentially a sizable number of these voters, and ignoring them would be a mistake. What do you think?
So I'm just imagining some oak right now in 4A's brew. I'm going to work, going to the gym. I'm a gay guy, but I want to watch the rugby with the boys on the weekend. Why am I part of the pink community? Like, you know, there are gay men. I would imagine that, like, who decided for us? Like, is that an insult to them? Is anybody talking about that? That's what I'm worried about. Like, oaks just want to go and draw on the weekend. Hey, but I'm not a part of the pink community. Get the hell out of here, kind of thing. Who decided on their behalf?
That would be like saying the straight community they vote together. They do the same thing. I mean, clearly
they're a big voting bloc.
Yeah.
No. So you think this is stupid?
No, it's so like pink community or pink. No. Is that not demeaning? It's got to be.
So
there's a bigger thing that's
people who don't like Elton John is considered in the pink community, right? Is that how it works? I don't know. What's the cutoff? Sorry,
no. I think, but what's really demeaning about that entire report is the fact that it just says you should get these people to vote for you because of their sexual orientation, not we should worry about safety for not just gay people but all people. We should worry about human rights. We should like what just so what are you going to do? Throw like pink buttons at them that say vote for me, or like wave a flag, a rainbow flag that says vote for me?
So we do know in America, I mean, we know in America that the pink community, let's call them that for the want of a better term, because if I have to say LGBTQIA plus every time, I'm going to lose my mind. But let's just call them the pink vote. In America, the pink vote does side more or less all the time with the Democrats, right? So they do vote in a certain direction if they are prepared to be denominated as a group because of their sexual preference. There are people who do like that. There's, those people who take part in pride, and those people who value their sexual orientation as being an identifier. It's part of their identity. They describe themselves like that. They have pronouns in their bio on Instagram or Twitter or wherever. And they do vote a certain way. It seems like a block vote. But
maybe they vote a certain way because they identify with the ideologies of a certain, so if you have on the one side a party that says, I don't believe that people who identify a certain way should be allowed to go into the bathroom. Like, you know what I'm saying? Then you're more likely to vote for the party that says it's okay.
Yeah.
If you have a party on the one side that says, I don't think you should marry whoever you want to marry because they are of the same sexual orientation as you, then you're more likely to vote for the other person that says you can marry whoever you want to marry. So it's not necessarily that they vote that way because the pink vote has been appealed to. Come on.
It's like I get really annoyed when people talk about the black vote in America, and you hear people saying the black vote. I'm like, I know a few, we've interviewed a few black conservatives from the United States. They definitely don't vote the black vote way, So what are you talking about? It's nonsense.
Quite famously, Ray Charles was a Republican, even though for many, 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 many years, he wasn't allowed to perform in certain city halls because he was black. And you know what I'm saying? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Come
Anyway,
on.
there it is. If you want to see that that story, that's from IOL, which should make it dubious in the first place. Anyway, there's other stuff going on. About
Did you
7.
talk about the Nando's ad?
Oh yeah. Well,
Speaking of IOL.
let's talk about the Nando's ad, because we've got the burning platform later on, which is brought to you by Nando's. So go ahead, Pums. You brought this up. You tell it. I haven't seen
So
that.
you have not seen the ad. Okay, so Nando's has a new ad.
Yeah.
Which is about a couple in the East who are expecting 11 babies.
Oh, right.
You know,
that's
and then
short.
had the babies. And it's such a brilliant ad, and it's such a funny ad, and it's about affordability, of course, right? Affording 11 babies and affording a meal at Nando's. And
Right.
it's hilarious. And when they put it out on social media, it also said the prices won't leave you petrified.
Because of Pete Rampedi, right?
Oh my God. Pete Rampedi lost his damn mind over the weekend because of this ad.
Oh, really? What did he have to say? Was he trying, like, going to sue them and stuff?
He wasn't going to sue them. He was just going to expose them for being like part of the Tuma Mina media group and being hashtag factional chicken.
Oh, you are joking. What a loser.
Unbelievable.
Oh, it was insane. So the hashtag factional chicken, hashtag political chicken was then trending over the weekend. And I'm just like, political chicken, really? Political chicken? Factional chicken? Pete lost his mind, which obviously then plays into the social media manager of Nando's. Where they then got into this like, oh my word. Pete was unhappy about the factional chicken. The factional chicken was very happy about the free advertising.
That's so great.
Incredible. Yeah.
It's wonderful if they're talking about you.
I know we'll get into the politics later on in the burning platform, and we've got Lord Peter Hain joining us from the UK. He's just written a new book, and Kanthan makes a surprise guest appearance, a new cameo role for him in the burning platform this morning. So we're thrilled that it's going to be a really action-packed burning platform today. But all of that aside, there is this story about this woman. I think her name is like Jaume Havard or something. Jaume Havard. She's the Chinese candidate that the ANC put forward. Yeah, in the ANC.
I think she's an MP.
Mm.
And there was a big thing about her buying her way in. But I love the latest story that she might be a spy for China.
She's giving the Chinese Communist Party inside info. But then I wouldn't be surprised if everyone in the ANC's top 6 is giving the Chinese Communist Party inside info because they're bosom buddies. I don't think the Chinese Communist Party has to ask twice. They're like, you tell us what's going on in ANC. ANC's like, oh, we'll tell you anything you want.
How much?
No, yeah. How much?
Phumi much.
That's also but that's so like, why would they care?
Well, they want to know who to bribe. You know, Chinese foreign policy at the moment is all about like Belt and Road Initiative and how do we get what we want out of a country. They're very strategic. We know this. So they come in here and they're like, well, which guy do we have to get to sign the paper so we can do the things we need to do?
So make no mistake, China are coming. If we don't believe this, Mandarin mandatory in Zambia. Well, I mean, you know, for me in any country, once they get into your education system, mandatory in Zambia, or not mandatory, but taught in schools, not mandatory, taught in some schools in Zambia. I know that for a fact, right? I have somebody who works on the ground. But let me tell you an interesting story. I was working at a place called Afri-Ski in Lesotho. It's a ski resort, and there are massive, let's say diamond mine, and all the diamond mines are just past Afri-Ski. You've got to go past Makasela Pass to kind of get there, right? Mm-hmm. And the sort of 4 years the guys I knew were involved, the Lesotho government couldn't like pave the roads or anything because Afri-Ski obviously wants South Africans to travel there.
Sure.
The Chinese took over the mine within 2 months. The road was fully paved, right? Like 150K road was fully paved from the border. They repaved from the border to the mine. Like, if you don't understand how serious China are at getting this thing done, especially we have resources untapped because we've been mucking about for 25 years and not actually maintaining our mines. But anyway, different conversation. They are coming, and this is like, I'm not surprised if she is that. Like, to me, it makes more sense than if she isn't, actually, because they are coming. It will happen. It's going to happen. And it's, shout out.
But I think Mandarin has been an option in a number of learning institutions across the world. So you're not saying it's mandatory, you're saying it's an option. But I think a lot of people realize, like Cyril Ramaphosa's son went off to China and can speak Mandarin. That's smart. I think that's actually a smart move. If you want to do business with China one day and you can speak Mandarin, that's like, back in the old days of where English and French were the main languages here in Africa.
It's like learning French in Africa.
Correct.
But I must tell you, it is more insidious than that. So obviously for me in my field, sport, China have paid for the last 4 African Cup of Nations, right? They've gone into those countries, paid for every stadium, and off that, they make the natural resource deals. We know that now. That's real, but which is fine. America does it all the time. It's not like what China is doing is unique. Everybody does it. It's not unique to them.
It's the new imperialism, sure.
Indeed.
So we've just got to accept. Again, this all came up because I brought up this Charmaine Harvard, who's the ANC candidate, who's supposedly giving them information. I don't think that you need to have an insider, a mole inside the ANC. All of their secrets are pouring out left, right, and center. They are like a cracked, broken vase. You don't need to employ someone and pay them millions and let them bribe other people. And, the old spy, counter-spy thing. You don't need that. Like, if the Chinese Communist Party want to know what's happening in South Africa, all they have to do is pick up the phone. Hello? Hi. Is that Ace Mahashule? Yes. Here's 500,000 for now, and we'll give you some more if you tell us more. Okay. What do you want to know? That's kind of how it works at the moment. Kanda Kulu says the Chinese are on the continent. It is yet to be seen if they will be worse than the Europeans or Americans or just another colonist. Well, absolutely. But isn't it sad that we always on this continent have to have masters somewhere else? That's what upsets me.
Which is an indictment on the leaders we have on this continent.
Correct.
It's not so much who comes in and what they plan on doing. It's about who we have on this continent and how they receive and react.
Right. From your mouth to God's ears, Phumi. All right. We've got a couple of minutes to go until we get to the burning platform. What else is on your agenda, Pums? What's been happening in the world that you want to discuss? Because I know you come in.
I have no agendas.
You have no agendas.
No
hidden ones, no obvious ones.
Speaking of which, Freek de Priya, his name's agenda back in the day, hey? Freek de Priya, what's he up to? Okay, who is? It was Freek, okay. What was his name?
Freek de Priya.
Or was it?
Yeah, before there was carte blanche.
Yeah, remember agenda.
Hang on.
Am I right? I mean, it is
carte blanche.
Yeah, it was Freek, eh?
It's Freek.
I'm telling you, you don't remember agenda, Gareth, and you remember rap lyrics.
No, hang on. No, Freek de Priya was a South African rugby player.
So what was the
Freek Robinson?
Robinson. Sorry, I was thinking, okay, what's he up to? He had a great head of hair.
Dude, he's still around. Freek Robinson's still around. He does Ian Nice on Cake News at the moment.
Still going.
That's what happens.
Celebrated 40 years in broadcasting.
Fantastic.
How's that? He's 68 years old and he's still going strong.
Only 68.
Yeah. I thought when you said Freek de Priya, I was like, hang on a second, that doesn't sound right. Who's the guy? Because you're right, Pums, this is almost pre-carte blanche days, right? This is the early days. Freek Robinson.
This is definitely
Freek Robinson. What a legend.
But remember how a couple of weeks ago on the burning platform, we learned a very fascinating, because you bring up the old people, about why we retire at 65.
Say that again. You broke up.
about why we retired at 65.
Yes,
a couple
that
of
was
weeks ago.
amazing. That was really interesting. Was that Mike Schussler who told us that?
Yeah. And
Oh.
I'm absolutely fascinated by that concept and how much longer people live now. And obviously, because of my grand's passing, we've been doing a lot of kind of thinking back on Gran and all of those things. Guys, my grandmother was retired for 30 years.
Yeah, what's this?
And a pension's not meant to last that long.
30 years. You
That's
work
amazing.
for 40 years.
Well, I wonder when
So
I think about
30 years.
Pandemic. You know, I joked with someone the other day that this pandemic has taught a lot of people what retirement feels like far too early, because you wake up, you can move your schedule around, you can kind of see people when you want to see them, you can walk around in your slippers all day, you can go to sleep if you want to in the afternoon for half an hour without anyone knowing. I mean, most of these things everybody can get away with now. You're in semi-retirement thanks to the coronavirus pandemic. So your grandmother did that for 30 years. She was in retirement.
It's mental.
Which I kind of, the thing for me is also like maintaining your lifestyle for 30 years after you no longer receiving the full income. Because when you retire, you don't get your full salary. You get a portion thereof, right? And maintaining your lifestyle. Like, what?
It's costly. That is some costly stuff. And they didn't figure that into original retirement planning because they expected you to be dead by 70, right?
It's definitely made me kind of think about that RA. I'm like, am I saving enough? Am I saving enough? Also because, because if history is the best determiner of what's coming, my other way last year and she was 88.
Ooh, you're gonna last a long time, Phumi.
Yeah, you're gonna.
This
and Phumi, how many kids do you have? One, hey, or two?
Yeah,
because it's probably
also
worth
because I can't afford
a
more than one.
But who's going to maintain you? Because it sounds like you're going to live till 150 from with your great family history. You're going to need to probably.
Well, he's just going to have to do. He's
to
just
get rich.
Have to do. I'm just gonna have to have a good relationship with him, and he's going to have to do.
Arranged marriage because he has to marry rich. Like even if he does well, I mean, you're going to live. Okay, let's be realistic. 120. You're going to need somebody with 3 or 4 generations of wealth that he marries. You've got to arrange that. It's the only way. 40 years of retirement. That's insane. Like when obviously as a hero, I survived COVID. I mean, I don't want to go on about it, about inspiring people, whatever. Me changing the face. Yeah, me changing the face of how you come back from adversity, whatever. I don't want to talk about that.
Oh.
What I want to say is I remember like those 14 days. Like do that for 40 years. 40 years. No.
No,
Your grand's the MVP.
It's amazing, right? Because actually, when you don't owe anybody else your time, because that's what a job is, right? You're owing somebody your time. You can do Mbulelo. You can jump off mountains. You can run and ski. You can swim. You know what I'm saying? Come on, but you still have like 40 years of doing that stuff. I would say in the 30 years that she's been retired, she had a good 20 years of great life, maybe 25, right? Of being free, being able to move, do what you want, have the hobbies you want, all of that kind of stuff. And Mbulelo, maybe you're onto something about marrying rich. Because with somebody else's money.
Yes.
That's always
just saying.
You can get a driver, drive you everywhere.
Yes.
Just the last thing you want to do at 84 is think about money. You've got to make sure that you really grease that wheel with your daughter and
other people's money.
Absolute. Oh, I don't know if you remember the days of getting hammered, but there is nothing. You can be absolutely hammered, but if somebody offers you a free beer, there's nothing quite as nice back in the day as a free beer. Like I'm 10 beers in, but do you want a beer? Yes. I can barely stand, but yes. Yes.
It's like a friend of mine says, his rule for life is if you want, you must take it.
Okay. Okay, right.
Okay.
That's what he goes by. If you want, you must take it. That's
You
all.
must take it.
No other rules are- I've got this cool thing. So for my birthday, one of my friends gave me a Amazon Echo. You know those little speakers.
Wow. Yeah.
So I've never tried one of these before. So you talk to it, and then you ask it to give you the news, for example, and you can subscribe to a number of different news services. So you can get a whole mix. You can I want MSNBC, I want CNN, I want Fox, I want BBC, I want Sky, I want Russian television news. RT, yeah, RT, I got it there. So what it does then is gives you a daily briefing, and you can ask it in the morning, and I do this now before I get ready for the show. For like 15 minutes, I'll sit and listen to this daily briefing, and I love it because it makes me feel like I'm the president, because you get this collated report of all the news across all the different networks. It's amazing. It's really, really cool. So I like this. This is my
I'd
new
love
way of
to see
getting
how far it goes. Like Swingers Daily, you see if you can punch in like Swingers Daily, just to know what the swinging
What's happening
community
in the
around you's up to.
community.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Just Swingers Daily, what's happening? Is Sharon and Dave still together?
No, it says Swingers Daily.
I
is
think
not
that's a
available.
WhatsApp group.
Oh,
I think
okay.
that's a WhatsApp group,
Sorry.
Mbulelo.
Sorry, no,
I don't think-
I've gone from private to public, and that's okay. Sorry, that's a
There's
that's a whole
there are a lot of options. There are a lot of options here.
Swingers
Lots.
options. Sounds a
No.
lot like Swing.
No, not Swingers options. All the options of daily briefings. Pretty cool. You can get
that is cool.
Formula One news.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. There's a lot of stuff here. Wired, BuzzFeed. You've got plenty of options here. This is interesting. All right.
We do live in the greatest time of all time. I mean, the fact that we can do this is like, we always blame, people always very quick to, oh my God, the MTV and the YouTube. Blame the user. Like, we the problem. Phones are awesome. Technology is awesome. You need to attenuate.
And you've got to be your own editor. You've got to decide what content you're taking on and what content you're going to stay away from. And that will determine how your day goes. You've got no one to blame but yourself.
Again, which is why you want to be retired. So you have time to experience all these things. Again, Mbulelo, like that marrying for money is growing on me more and more.
I'm telling you, don't get emotional about it.
Just
Don't
trying
get
to
emotional.
think. I mean, I'm still young enough. I could find a rich older husband, surely.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no,
Okay.
you are still. Oh my goodness.
You're not.
You are.
Don't worry.
You're beautiful. You're prime stock, smart,
So just-
dynamic.
To everyone watching and listening, right? If just send me all of your options of those people that I should sidling up to.
Well,
I already have the people for you. I'll tell you right now. More likely German or Swiss, because if you've been to the German club lately, and you'd know better than us, I remember going to I went to the German club last year. Didn't see a single couple that was only black or only white. Everything is we're getting in the mix. I'm just saying. Plus you already sprechen the Deutsch, so you're already vorsprung.
Exactly. No, this is good. Yeah, Pums, that's not a bad plan. Would you like to be married to someone, especially if you know the guy? Maybe he's got he's maybe 20 years older than you. So you can put in minimal effort, and you really have to look
Also
after
with Deutsch, with Euro, hey.
Yes.
Because with euros.
Yeah. Oh no, but he won't last as long. And then what you can do, Pums, is you can look after him and be a nice wife for a little while, and then for a long while after that, you can spend all of his money.
Yes.
I want to be one of those guys.
It's just being a nice wife.
I'm going to be one of those guys one day. I'm going to make sure I've got lots of money, and then I'll marry a girl who's at least 20 years younger than me, and we'll have children. And then I'm not going to last as long as she is, so she gets to have all the money when I'm gone. That's her bonus at the end.
She also gets to look after your brats when you're gone.
They'll be her brats as well. So hopefully she's to that. Hopefully she's not a complete horrible person.
I reckon. on probably the, I don't know, top 5 greatest comedies of all time, Blackadder. There's such a classic scene exactly about this. Is Brian Blessed as like the version of the Pope dies. Brian Blessed on his deathbed is like trying to get him to the papacy to give all the property to the king. You know, it's like in that death moment. So for me, you're going to have to be that guy as he crosses over to the other side. You need to ensure that he signs absolutely everything. Forget his kids, forget his family, everything.
It's got to be before that. It's got to be before that. People must know that it's coming. People must like know and be prepared, be psychologically prepared.
Right.
Love it.
Like,
I love it.
Here we are. We're plotting against some unknown person. And he has no idea, but we're coming
Friedrich.
for you.
Yeah,
at least 70 years
Friedrich
old.
Moller.
Yeah, whoever you might be. Phumi and Mbulelo and I are coming for you. All right, very good.
And your money.
We've got a lot to get to in the next hour. It is the Burning Platform, which of course is brought to you by Nando's. It's your opportunity to talk with us about all the current affairs, all the things that are going on in South Africa. And we will also be speaking to a man about a brand new book. And that man is Peter Hain. He has been a guest on the show before. He's also been on my TV show a number of times, and we're looking forward to speaking to him this morning about his new book and also about his take on all the things that are going on in South Africa at the moment. He's very much appraised of what the local political situation is. So he's not some guy who's living in Britain not paying attention to us. And of course, Kanthan Pillay makes a returning star appearance on the Burning Platform. So all of that's coming up next. Stick around, cliffcentral.com on a Thursday morning with Phumi and Mbulelo and you and I. It's very, very good. Don't you go anywhere. All of that and more on the way.
This week on Auto Central.
This question comes from Eugene, who's asked, my Peugeot 206 is heavier on fuel at the coast than it is at the reef. Moved from Johannesburg to Cape Town. Any advice?
Well, fuel consumption changed when you moved down to the coast. Could be explained, Eugene, by the higher air density. It could be also a case that you're a little bit heavier on the throttle because you have a little bit more power, because air density plus more fuel means more power, which means we tend to be a little bit heavier with our foot.
Catch Auto Central, SA's #1 motoring podcast, every Monday at 9 a.m.
Grunt when getting out of the car? Creak when getting out of bed? Do you walk into a room and forget why? Are you having trouble in the sack? Is the hump in a slump? Join me, Chris Haven-Smith, and Dr. Mark on the T-Health Show every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. where we talk to medical and allied professionals about those serious and not so serious medical lifestyle issues. The T-Health Show, sponsored by the T-Clinic. The T-Health Show is available on podcasts. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.
Finding quick solutions is key to a great economic quarter. Use the Nando's app to order a quarter chicken with any single side for only 49 Rand in just 20 seconds. Nando's. Fire it up. T's and C's apply.
Well, cliffcentral.com on a Thursday morning means one thing and one thing only. It means the Burning Platform, which is brought to you by Nando's. And Nando's, we were talking about their ad just the other day for Pitrambedi and for all the people, all the people who are interested in that story about the kids who were born, the supposed decuplets who were born some time ago. Some very clever advertising from Nando's there. We're looking forward this morning to unpacking a whole lot of really interesting things that are going on in the news, the stories that are occupying our minds politically, socially, and economically. And this morning is is absolutely not any different to any of the other episodes of this, except that we've got two really amazing guests. One of them a return champion and someone who we are very happy to have back. Kanthan Pillay, it's good to see you, Kanthan.
Morning, guys. I'm
Yes,
fit and
very
fabulous.
I'm very
Hello,
pleased to hear it.
Kanthan.
Don't we
Hello,
have a
Phumi.
birthday? We have a birthday coming up soon, don't we, Kanthan?
We do have a birthday coming up soon, and it's the big 6-0.
Ooh, big
Wow.
6-0. Nice. Things to celebrate. Well, I
Are
mean,
you
with
going
your...
to have?
Go on, Pums.
Are you going to have a big like lockdown rules breaking party, like a
Well,
certain MEC?
Well, no, I'm only inviting my immediate family, which means I've got about 600 people.
Yeah, that's a big one to celebrate, though. But the silver hair has been there for some time, so you can't even claim that that's novel.
Yeah, I've had the silver hair since my 20s, actually. So it's just kind of increased in volume since then.
Right. Well, we're going to be
Which
joined
is
in a
good
moment.
hair for a 60-year-old.
It's very good hair.
Let's not go down that route, Phumi, because if I start saying similar things in your direction, then I'll be accused of rampant sexism and all of that kind of stuff.
Yes. And we will get to our other guest this morning in a moment. He's just busy sorting out his microphone, and we're going to find out what's going on over there with him in a moment. And he's brought to the market a brand new book, which is called A Pretoria Boy. So I have this in common with our guest. I'm also a Pretoria boy. And I suppose you could also say people like Elon Musk are. And what we all have in common is it's very difficult to figure that out. But we all sort of have a bit of a rebellious streak. And this guy has a huge rebellious streak because he started looking for trouble at an early age. And trouble found him. He is Peter Hain. Lord Peter Hain, how are you?
Good, thanks very much. Nice to talk to you again, Jeremy.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you too. It's good to have you on the show this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about your book in a moment, but we'll also get to all the stuff that I know that you're more interested in than most people who live in the UK, and that is South Africa and South African politics and the ongoing mess within the ANC. Our elections are supposedly coming up. There are so many things we can get into. But why have you brought out this book? Because I think your story is quite well known to many of us. Is this the earlier years, the stuff that we don't know, Peter?
Well, I've not had a book published in South Africa before about my story. And when Jonathan Ball discussed it with me, they thought they'd be interested in it, which starts off with the exposing the money laundering and the complicity of the international corporations in the Zuma Gupta looting. Then goes back to the beginning of my childhood and so on. So somebody like you, Gareth, who's delved into my background, perhaps it is familiar, but I think to a lot of people, it's completely new, whether it is anti-apartheid activism in London after my family was forced to go into exile in the 1960s, receiving a letter bomb and things like that, of the sort that security forces assassinated anti-apartheid leaders across the world with. I think probably there will be a lot new in it, and certainly people have been very kind in giving a verdict if they've read it.
Oh, absolutely. And I would recommend to anybody, not just people who are interested in you, but also people who are interested in the history of this country. I mean, you go into your involvement in the House of Lords and what you've done to try and expose the laundering, the money laundering, the corruption in the Jacob Zuma administration, which is recent history. The stuff that you've been doing across the seas and across the rest of Africa to make sure that South Africa remains top of mind in the UK. And there are also some lovely pictures in here. I saw a picture of you with Madiba, you with Ahmed Katrada, There's also a lovely picture of you standing in front of your old school in Pretoria.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yes,
good
well,
stuff.
there's all of that. But I suppose the motivation for it was that when I did, at the request of Pravin Gordhan and other senior ANC figures in the run-up to the conference at the end of 2017, when former President Zuma was hoping to continue his dynasty with his favored candidates and Cyril Ramaphosa was challenging him, they wanted the story that had become well known inside South Africa after brave investigative journalists had exposed it, of the looting and the corruption under Zuma and the Gupta brothers. They wanted the international dimension to it exposed. And that's where I was able to help, and they asked me to do it. And I described my source or sources as a deep throat who, inside the Zuma state, who gave me gave me all of the information that I used under parliamentary privilege. But the important point about it was that up until that point, it had been a story confined largely to South Africa, and well known inside South Africa. But suddenly, it was on the front pages of the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the Washington Post when I exposed it under parliamentary privilege. So that caused the corporates involved, HSBC Bank, Standard Chartered, Bank of Baroda, the McKinseys, the KPMGs, and the rest of them, who would basically be getting the fat fees and helping with the money laundering and the corruption. Suddenly they felt the heat, and their bosses flew over from New York and so on to meet me in my office in the House of Lords, asked to see me. And I suppose that was that was what that achieved. But suddenly, I found my name up in lights in the South African media, and I think a lot of people, particularly those not necessarily well-read like you, Jeremy, but those perhaps under 60, suddenly thought, what's this British lord? What's he on about?
Right.
And so really the purpose of the book was to say, actually, this British lord was a Pretoria boy, and this is his story. And
I think maybe it's right that your name is as well known as it is in South Africa. I certainly hope people will read the book to find out more about your actual story. But the exposure which you gave to this story internationally and in the corporate world is ongoing. I mean, we this chapter is not closed yet, and we are still seeing lots of information coming to the fore. And South Africa kind of owes you a debt of gratitude for that, because this may have remained a small local story, and the Guptas may have been unknown to the rest of the world if it wasn't for some of your efforts there. So I think we owe you a debt of gratitude for that, and I'm pleased to have you on the show this morning. Thank you very much. So we're gonna get straight into it. Phumi, Kanthan, Peter, let's see what we can figure out about where we are at the moment, because there is quite a lot going on. I saw just the other day that Jacob Zuma, who we've just mentioned, is refusing to let the doctors come and examine him. He's too sick, and he says, I'm not going to cooperate. Now, isn't there already a mechanism in South African law by which we don't need you to be present in your own trial? Isn't there a way we can try you in absentia for the things that you are charged with, even if you want to be as uncooperative as possible?
Well, I think that we can take a view that in these COVID times, Gareth, we've got a scenario where we can plonk down a computer in Jacob Zuma's hospital ward and just ensure that he's part of the trial, whether he wants to be physically present or not.
Yeah, and
surely there's precedent for it. Now, second point that I want to make in terms of the question of whether or not one can actually force Jacob Zuma to take a medical examination. I think there's a very interesting precedent that came out from a case some years ago that in the Western Cape High Court that was presided over by Judge Siraj Desai, where there was a person who was a suspect in a criminal case that involved shooting. And the way in which he could be identified is if a bullet that was lodged in his leg was actually extricated, and they were able to run ballistic tests on it to show that he was in fact present at the crime scene. And he refused to do so on the grounds that it was going to endanger his health. And in that particular scenario, Judge Desai basically issued an order that the bullet will be removed because there's not going to be a threat to his health, and he instructed the police to execute that order within 24 hours, and but gave him time to appeal, but the order had to be executed immediately. And yes, the bullet was extricated. Ballistic tests were run on the bullet, and yes, it was shown that he was in fact the criminal that was present at the crime scene, and the rest is history. So I think using that as a particular precedent.
If we could find some singular piece of evidence that would just close this case and show us for once and for all that Jacob Zuma is the guy at the center of all this mess for the last 20 years, wouldn't that be wonderful?
Phumi is a Zuma fan. Come on, tell us.
You know what, guys? I think there are no surprises there. There are no surprises that he's found yet another reason to not show up, not have his day in court. He's found yet another reason that he can then stand up and say, so even if you put all the measures in place that Kanthan speaks about, right? Even if there's an order that says he has to be examined, that you put a computer in front of his face, all of that, it doesn't make a great story, right? It doesn't further his story that says, I've not been given my opportunity to defend myself. I'm not, it gives everybody an opportunity to say, when's Zuma? Like, why are we surprised? Why are we surprised in even talking about this? But, I'm very fascinated though at Peter's story about how complicit international business and big business and banks in particular have been in getting the money out of South Africa, in allowing the transactions, not just for the Guptas, but for many, many other people. That I'm very interested.
Maybe, Peter, that you could give us some details on this, because I know that parliamentary privilege doesn't really come into play on this show, but there are things that you probably can tell us about Jacob Zuma. We heard from his spokesperson, Mzwanele Manyi, this week that he has no money ferreted away. He's a poor man who's now asking the rest of South Africa to please donate to help him cover the costs of his legal fees. Although he has sons and daughters who are supposedly multi-millionaires, they don't seem to be at the front of the queue donating money. He's asking ordinary, hardworking South Africans to donate money. How difficult is it for people who've been involved in corruption in a country like ours to hide their money internationally? And who are the bad guys here? The banks that help them hide it?
Well, Gareth, it's not just the banks. It's not just HSBC, Standard Chartered, Bank of Baroda, which were the principal conduits for the money laundering. And we're talking about billions of rands. The figures are in my book and in the evidence I gave to the Zondo Commission, and I think are well known. It's not just billions of rands, but it went out through, say, take HSBC. So they have a Johannesburg office and series of offices. Then there's a digital pipeline from their office that goes to Dubai and Hong Kong and London in the main, which is where the money went. But then what then happens is that a series of shell companies are set up, front companies, which the Guptas stand behind them and the Zumas stand behind them, but their names are not on the kind of nameplate, as it were, but they're completely fictitious companies. And so the money is sent there, and then it's passed on to another one, and it keeps going. Now, the banks, what it does do is leave a digital footprint. Right. So if the banks were really determined to track it down, they could do so. It would be hard because you've then got a whole series of other actors. You've got the lawyers who set up these companies. You've got the accountants who manipulate it. You've got the auditors, some of them big names like KPMG. You've got the consultants who organize all of this, like McKinsey. And you've then got state agents who buy property and launder the money that way. For example, the Guptas have a prestigious property in Dubai. And then you've got governments, Indian government, the British government, the Chinese government in respect of Hong Kong, the Hong Kong authorities, the UAE, the Dubai ruler. They're all complicit as well because they haven't done anything about recovering this looted money.
Right.
So what you have is a whole lot of international actors, agencies, banks, businesses, so-called professional enablers, the consultants, the estate agents, the lawyers, and so on, the auditors, that they're the ones earning fat fees from all of this, which is taxpayers' money, your taxpayers' money, after all.
Correct.
So, I mean, that's the broader picture to it all.
So, I mean, there's really, there are two levels to this corruption, and you almost have to admire, begrudgingly, the fact that it takes quite a lot of architecture to make these things happen. You know, it's not easy. It's not like robbing a bank. Robbing a bank would be much simpler than this. There's, first of all, the corruption itself. You have to get the money from state-owned entities, from the taxpayer, directly from Treasury, wherever you manage to steal it from. And you have to gain control of the wheels of power. And then you have to also make an entire system outside of that can help you hide the money. It's a very, very complex thing to do, and something that it irritates me when people say, oh, you know, Jacob Zuma and the Guptas are just, you know, common or garden thieves. They're really not. These are very, very smart, very, very technologically advanced creations, these vehicles that they use. And there are lots and lots of people involved along the way. So it's, you know, it's always easier to hide a body if you're the only one who knows where it is. But there are a lot of people who could be implicated here. How do we go after them, Peter?
Well, you can only do it, I've concluded, if you get governments across the world to prioritize it. When over 2 trillion
Mm-hmm.
$2 trillion US dollars is laundered in financial crime every year.
Yes.
So we're not just talking about the South African state capture episode with all its scandalous looting and so on. We're talking about this is going on all the time. And it is not just about the Zumas and the Guptas in the South African case doing their looting and their money laundering. Drug traffickers use the same conduits, financial conduits. People traffickers do. Terrorists do. What is interesting is some of these same methods of money laundering are being used by Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda and ISIS and so on. So it's organized crime on a global scale. And the thing that really struck me, and I didn't really understand this until I started getting involved, and particularly since I had some expert advice before I gave my evidence to the Zonda Commission, is that this is extremely complex in one sense, and it's actually quite simple in another, and it's happening all the time, and these very respectable, some of them household names across the world of these global corporates, they're up to their necks in it. And when these guys came to see me in my office in Westminster, because they were very worried about their reputation. I mean, they didn't mind if they were being criticized in Johannesburg, but once they were criticized at their headquarters in New York and in London, they started getting concerned about their share prices and their reputations globally. And then I said to the banks, well, you've admitted you had the Gupta accounts. You say you've closed them down.
Yes.
Well, why don't you participate? Why don't you collaborate with the South African Treasury, with any of us trying to uncover any of this? And they've been, Andrew Feinstein and others have been delving into this from London in much greater detail, with much more forensic expertise than I could ever muster on my own. Why don't you cooperate? Because you are, they said, but client confidentiality.
Oh, please.
So, I mean, my point is the four of us on this program, we're all honest citizens, or hope we are. We're entitled to client confidentiality.
I don't know. I mean, Phumi and Kanthan have got very shady backgrounds. So
listen here, Gareth.
Wait till their books come out. When Phumi and Kanthan's books come out, they won't be called the story of South Africa's public enemy #1. It'll be South Africa's public enemy #2 and 3. So
that's very unfair. But my point is, we're entitled to client confidentiality. But big international criminals like these guys surely are not.
No, there should be. So is any of you going to be helping to raise funds for Jacob Zuma's legal defense? I mean, come on. You're all capable people. You seem like you're conscientious. You seem like you're also caring. Doesn't our former president, he's almost 80 years old, doesn't he deserve a little bit of cash to help pay for his legal fees?
I saw someone make an interesting proposition, and I apologize for not giving credit to the person because I didn't take note at the time. The idea is to make a cash deposit into Zuma's account that is small enough that the amount that he pays in bank fees for the cash transaction is going to be more than the amount of money one deposits into the account.
And then he ends up with even more debt.
Exactly.
Not very
Well,
nice.
there are many crowdfunding initiatives currently happening. So it's either you're believing in Mzwanele Manye and crowdfunding for Baba's legal fees, or you're crowdfunding for the ANC's salary bill. I mean, there's so many ways.
Yes, can we talk about the ANC salary bill? Because
absolutely, let's get into
question that I was putting out yesterday, and it's kind of interesting to see how these things come out, because I asked people on Twitter for specific examples of how Jacob Zuma is a better president than Cyril Ramaphosa. And of course, I have the usual praise singers from both sides climbing in. Of course, they were saying, well, Ramaphosa is not corrupt, and Jacob Zuma is clearly corrupt, and so forth. The fundamental issue for me is that Cyril Ramaphosa is head of the ANC. He is the president of the African National Congress. Now, the African National Congress is not able to pay its own salary bill. Cyril Ramaphosa is an actual billionaire. Now, surely Cyril Ramaphosa has enough smarts to understand that the thing that he does as leader of this organization is to actually whip them into shape, give them a loan to cover their expenses in the short term, but keep this entire mess out of the public eye. But this guy completely lacks any sense of understanding that the correct thing to do is to keep his own house in order first. This is the equivalent of all of these guys you see outed on Twitter all the time who are spending massive amounts of money on car payments and on junkets for expensive weekends, but they're not able to pay their pub geld.
Yeah.
And this is Cyril Ramaphosa in a nutshell. And anyone who thinks that this man has the leadership capability to actually run the country, they are completely around the bend. Leaders eat last. This is another saying from a former South African, as in Simon Sinek. Leaders eat last. He should first be sorting out his entire own flipping organization. I'm so utterly disgusted by this guy.
Well, apparently it's not just financial problems, because the ANC couldn't even get their party list in properly the other day. They've missed out on a whole number of deadlines, and we're actually going to challenge the entire electoral process and have the elections postponed because of their own incompetence in submitting their own list for the election that's coming up, the municipal and local elections, which are just around the corner. Pums, what did you want to say? I interrupted you.
No, I'm just saying, so both those things for me are incredibly interesting to watch, as I've been saying for months now on the show, that this is the end, right? This is the beginning of the end for this party. And I'm again gonna have to direct this question to Lord Hain here to say, your parents were in the Liberal Party of South Africa, a party that no longer exists. So you have seen a party die. Are these some of the signs of how a party's demise comes about?
Well, I think the ANC will die unless it completely reforms itself and it goes back to its original mission, its noble mission, which was to overthrow apartheid and to establish a constitutional democracy. And to be fair, South Africa's constitution, probably the best in the world, is the creature of Oliver Tambo, the leader of the ANC for all those decades when Mandela was in prison, and Albie Sachs, and in the main. And they, that was a noble party with a noble mission, but it's become corrupted and become dysfunctional. I don't agree with what's just been said about Cyril Ramaphosa, by the way. I think South Africa is lucky to have him. I don't see anybody who rivals him for his experience, his skills, whether as a struggle hero, as a trade union negotiator and leader, as a business leader, as a constitutional negotiator. He was the one on behalf of Nelson Mandela and the leadership who did negotiate the transition and the new constitution. So I think you're very lucky to have him, quite frankly, though he's hemmed in by some bad guys and girls because, of course, his victory over the Zuma rights was very narrow. I'm not saying it's perfect. I don't like a lot of the things that are going on more than any of us do, but I think you're very lucky to have him. But to answer your question about the future of the ANC, I think it will die. All parties, no party has a God-given right to rule forever or to be in existence forever. It has
the
to...
ANC, there were a couple of people in the ANC who actually did claim exactly that not so long ago, that the ANC will be here until Jesus comes, were their exact words. But Peter, you've said something which shouldn't be controversial, that maybe Cyril's the best of a really bad bunch of politicians available to us. But this is quite controversial in South Africa at the moment, because a lot of the things that you said about Cyril are kind of ancient history. There's a leadership vacuum at the moment that many of us are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And I know you pay attention, so I don't mean to sound in any way patronizing or rude about this, but there are things that he's just not doing, and he's had so many opportunities here to grab the reins with both hands and to use coronavirus, frankly, as an excuse to do some of the things that he's needed to do for the longest time. And he just never takes them. We had a cabinet reshuffle the other day where he just moved around the deck chairs in the Titanic and put the same old people that have been in the ANC hierarchy since Mandela's time. He just moved them around into new departments. And it's done nothing to improve service delivery for poor people, infrastructure. In this case, the vaccine rollout, the health minister himself was implicated in corruption and is now apparently going to be looked into by the Special Investigations Unit and by the law. I mean, there are various court cases pending against him. So there are things going on at the moment that do poor old Cyril very little good in terms of PR. And I know Phumi disagrees with you because she doesn't tread lightly around Cyril Ramaphosa. I mean, Kanthan, Phumi, did I leave some things out there?
Well, I think the recent example of the past couple of days, Gareth, is something significant in this case, which is his former spokesperson, Kusela Diko. Now, Kusela Diko was finally suspended after much public outrage over the fact that her husband had been awarded a dodgy contract. And she was suspended on full pay, I must say, for the past period. And now we've been told that the investigation is over and she's going to be deployed into another position. And it turns out that the other position, according to reports that are out this morning, is going to be as Deputy Director General at Government Communications and Information System. So once again, this is a scenario where you have patent involvement in criminality, and our president fails to act. And in fact, he ends up rewarding the person. We have a similar scenario in terms of the recent cabinet rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, with Thandi Modise now being moved into
defense,
and Nosiviwe Mapisa Nkakula being moved to speaker. You know, how completely outrageous is this? You essentially fire the woman from cabinet for incompetence and then promptly put her into a position that's paying her even more money. And this has been a hallmark of Cyril Ramaphosa's entire tenure. And I'm not prepared to accept anything that says that he's forced to do this because of internal ructions within the ANC. No, the thing that he needs to do is to actually be presidential. And being presidential means firing the lot from the cabinet, depriving them of their ability to be funded by the state, appoint competent people to cabinet, and treat himself as a one-term president who's actually going to completely clean up the rot that is in government. And he's failing to do it. And the reason why he's failing to do it is because the ANC will always put the party before the country. Always.
And not even the party, because we can see the ANC, the party's breaking down, but even individuals in the party who are considered loyal cadres. Those are the people who get preferential treatment. It's not even the party, because there are lots and lots of members of the ANC all over who've never benefited personally from anything and never will, because they're not connected to the right people. Pums?
But what we haven't heard is why you believe South Africa is lucky to have Cyril Ramaphosa as a president. And we hear that statement, but the why is what I'm interested in hearing. I think lucky to have him at this point in time.
I'm sorry, Peter, to have put you in the position where you become Cyril Ramaphosa's cheerleader this morning. That was not my intention. But can you answer Pumi's question? Why are we lucky to have him?
Well, it's not my part of my responsibility to act as a cheerleader for anybody at the top of South African politics. I'm simply telling it as I see it. It was only one person, and that was because of the ANC's internal politics, likely to defeat the Zuma machine, and that was Ramaphosa. There's nobody else going to do it. So you have to make a choice. Were you going to support him or more of the same? And I think what we have seen far too slowly, far too frustratingly slowly, is change happening. People are being arrested who would never have been arrested before. Institutions, whether it's the revenue service or the police, are slowly beginning, or the National Prosecution Authority, beginning to be cleaned up. This is a long, hard slog. And it is frustratingly slow. I mean, I refer to this in the last chapter of my book, where I offer some thoughts from my perspective. I'm only one opinion amongst all of you on this program and anybody watching or listening, but I'm frustrated as well about the slowness of the change, because South Africa desperately needs shaking out of where it's been to move forward, and there is a lack of capacity around the presidency and a lack of delivery around the government. You know, I've been a government minister. I know how difficult it is actually to do things. It may sound odd to the rest of you for me to say that, but it is true. Even in a country like Britain, which doesn't have the apartheid legacy, has a longer institutionalized professional civil service and so on, it's difficult to make change. And I think Ramaphosa is grappling with that. But, you know, Phumi, I think South Africa is lucky to have him, because the alternative was massively worse. I think we can all agree with that.
So, in other words, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed is king.
No, that's not my argument, and that's a misrepresentation of what I'm saying, Gareth, as you well know, because you're laughing like hell at me.
Gareth, I've got to say that I agree to a large extent with most of the stuff that Peter Hain has said. We've spoken about that on this show before, in terms of the capacity of the National Prosecution Authority, for example, to actually implement change, based on the fact that the entire structure was filled with Jacob Zuma deployees, and there had to be a process where those people actually rooted out. We have entire structures of government where the directors general of the various departments, again, are Zuma deployees who are in a position to actually completely obstruct the ability to put in place those. And yes, I agree that the change process is slow. But this doesn't detract from the fact that one of the biggest reasons why the change process is slow is because of failure of leadership on the part of the president to actually act when there is opportunity to actually do so. One of the things that hasn't actually been spoken about enough was the abrupt departure of Tito Mboweni from the cabinet. And there have been hints by Tito Mboweni in terms of his Twitter feed for some months now that he was having major conflicts in terms of the Ramaphosa administration, and being able to do a couple of things. The one is, of course, is to enforce the fiscal discipline that he believes in. And he does believe in the fiscal discipline, because whenever any of the other ministers came around and they said, we need money for X, Y, and Z, he said, no, you can't have it, because we're not going to borrow more money to fund this. But I'd also like to take us back a couple of years when This was in fact, it was roughly on this date 2 years ago when Tito Mboweni released a document from National Treasury called Economic Transformation, Inclusive Growth and Competitiveness Towards an Economic Strategy for South Africa. And I'm just going to touch on a couple of points very quickly, just bullet points in terms of what he wanted to put in place. This was 2 years ago. He said government should have exemptions for small business in bargaining council agreements. Did not happen. Encourage immigration from skilled workers with tertiary qualifications from accredited institutions. Did not happen. Metro rail should be handed to the metros as part of an integrated transport plan. Did not happen. Transnet should become a rail infrastructure provider, but private companies should have access to their network. Did not happen. Substantial reforms in electricity generation and delivery. Well, effectively what we've got there are the Turkish power ships up until now. Okay, ending of supermarket monopolies. And this is in terms of the fact that if, for example, Pick n Pay is an anchor tenant in a supermarket, Checkers is not allowed to be in the same supermarket. Structures for pricing of fuel needs to change. All of these things.
Good ideas. All of them.
All of them good ideas, and I think all of which are things that we've spoken about on this show before, can immediately kickstart the South African economy. Cyril has been sitting on this for 2 years. He's had opportunity.
It's worse than that, isn't it? I mean, when it was released by Tito, there was a widespread disenchantment in the rest of cabinet and the ANC at large. They said that this is not what we believe, and this is not a good plan, and we don't like this.
That's absolutely right. And really, at that stage, Ramaphosa could have actually exercised leadership to say that, as the ANC, we believe that these things actually need to be discussed and aired in public, as opposed to be held behind the scene. So yes, absolutely right. Ramaphosa is the best of a bad lot right now. But in fact, that is an obstacle to the people of this country actually being able to see just what a poisonous institution the African National Congress actually is. They are committed to the concept of the National Democratic Revolution. They have no commitment right now in terms of any values of a traditional liberal democracy. Their role model happens to be the Chinese Communist Party. That is exactly the type of structure that they want to impose upon this country. And frankly, I think that if you had someone like Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma actually holding the reins of government, it would be far easier for the people of this country to see the ANC for what it is. Ramaphosa has a beautiful speaking voice, and that means that it allows that forked tongue of his to actually inflict far more damage behind the scene.
All right. So I would be remiss of me. I'm going to give you both the right to reply to what Kanthan just said now, even though it wasn't about anything controversial that you've brought up necessarily or counterposed to any of that. But I do want to get into some international stuff. So anything left on South Africa that you'd like to say? Phumi, Peter Hain?
I'm going to let Peter go first. Oh, okay. So I think it'll be fascinating to see what happens with the elections. It's one of my favorite things is looking at the numbers and the turnouts. And with the ANC, I think they said that they're not contested. They haven't put in their list for about a third of the municipalities. Wow. That means, and we've got new players. We had Mr. Mashaba here last week. It's going to be fascinating to see. It's going to be fascinating to see if people do actually show up to vote, and how they tend to vote. And in places where the ANC is not even there on the ballot, how people show up to vote in those places is going to be a real interesting thing to look at, to see how people are reacting to the shambles that is the ANC. And it will give us a little bit of an indication on what we can look for in 2024.
Just to my observation is you've got not only a dysfunctional ANC, you've actually got a dysfunctional opposition. And governments, and I've been in government, and I've been part of a losing Labour government in 2010 after 13 years of actually successful government, but we lost in 2010 for all sorts of reasons. You've got to be kept true by facing the threat of losing.
Yeah.
And the longer parties are in power, and we've seen this so terribly in Zimbabwe, but you could see it elsewhere as well. Putin in Russia at the moment, for example, the Chinese Communist Party. The longer you're in power, the more complacent you get, the more corruption occurs, the more you're not kept on your mettle. Democracy is a great instrument for keeping people accountable. It's very imperfect, and the Brexit vote, for example, I thought was disastrous for Britain. So democracy can produce all sorts of undesirable outcomes, but it is the best of the options. But you don't have a functioning opposition in South Africa of any serious or credible kind. There was one. The DA looked in around up to 2017, when a lot of municipal elections and city elections went against the ANC. It looked as if at last the ANC was being made accountable. But I don't see that happening. What I worry about is decline. Phumi, you implied this, declining turnout, as there's greater and greater disillusionment with the whole of politics.
Right.
A splintering of opposition, which is not a healthy thing, because it means there's no one party that can genuinely displace the ruling party.
Correct.
And the whole sort of system limping along in a dysfunctional way, unless there's a big shake-up in the ANC. I think that's more likely. I don't see the DA providing credible opposition. I certainly don't think the EFF will or should command support. I don't see it winning any sort of serious support because of its authoritarianism and its populism and all the corruption around it and so on. But so that's what my main concern is, in brief, Gareth, is declining turnout, splintering opposition, and politics sort of just gradually atrophying in the country, and that's not healthy.
Well, let's hope for the high road rather than the one last mentioned. Thank you all for those comments on the local situation. If we can just turn our attention to the big world story at the moment, the US has finally completed its withdrawal from Afghanistan, and I know that all three of you are also very much au fait with what's going on in the world of politics. How does this reflect on the United States, their position in the world going forward, foreign policy in the future, Joe Biden's presidency, and the fact that his poll numbers are dropping precipitously since his decision to withdraw from Afghanistan? So what comments do we have on this? Pums, do you want to start, and then I'll let the gentleman go first. Go after you, sorry.
No, I don't want to start, because you know my stance on this. No, because you do know my stance on this, and I think the listeners have heard it before. I think it would be of much value for us to hear Lord Peter Hain as an international player as well first.
Okay. What do you have to say about Afghanistan, Lord Hain?
Well, Gareth, first of all, let's go back to the beginning. I was in government. I was part of the government. I was actually in the British Foreign Office when the invasion, when 9/11 happened, and the invasion took place to try and get rid of Al-Qaeda and stop anything like 9/11 happening again. That was the motivation at the time. But actually, in retrospect, first of all, Afghanistan has never accepted foreign invaders. Going back to the British in the 19th century, the Russians, the Soviets in the 1970s. And
great empires.
Yeah, driven out of Afghanistan. So I don't think in retrospect there was any prospect of this mission, 20-year mission, ending in a tidy way, if I could use that phrase.
Sure.
I think we can all criticize the Biden administration, the British administration, which was in lockstep with the US on all of this, and others involved, France, etc. Can all criticize the manner of a withdrawal, the desperate plight of Afghans who are now facing persecution by the Taliban. The really concerning future for women in Afghanistan. One of the successes of the last 2 decades was the opportunities for women that now look like being closed down, tragically. So, but I think in retrospect, what should have happened was a much more surgical approach to eradicate Al Qaeda. They couldn't be left there. To allow that to happen was simply to invite more 9/11s anywhere in the world. So that had to be dealt with. I think it could have been done in retrospect in a more surgical fashion rather than whole-scale invasion. There was never an attempt to really negotiate with the Pashtun, who form the largest group in Afghanistan, which is itself quite a fragmented society, or with the Taliban. The Taliban, as we've seen now, odious though a lot of their policies and reactionary they are towards human rights, and particularly towards women's rights, they represent, a great big constituency in Afghanistan. And instead of just shunning them and deeming them as terrorists and cold shouldering them and putting, attracting forces in Afghanistan which were sympathetic to Washington and to Western policy. And that's failed. We should have been trying from the beginning to negotiate with them and treat them with some respect that they deserve, whether or not you agree with them. Just one final point on this. Tony Blair's former chief of staff, with whom I worked very closely when I was Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and negotiated the 2007 peace settlement that brought the bitter old blood enemies into sharing government together. Jonathan Powell wrote a book called Talking to Terrorists. And he said, in the end, you don't resolve wars, you don't resolve conflicts by continuing to fight. In the end, there's always a negotiated solution. And we see this in Colombia, we've seen this in the Basque Country, in Spain, all across the world. And I think that lesson in retrospect should have been learned from the beginning. And it was never going to be easy for Biden or the British or anybody to get out of Afghanistan in a tidy way.
But surely the argument that this could have been a more surgical and more well thought through plan to just extirpate Al Qaeda and to otherwise leave Afghanistan to its own devices and not necessarily make it an imperial project. That's a very good point that I don't think anyone's going to disagree with. But then the same logic should be applied to the withdrawal. It should have been a more strategic, more well thought through plan. And, Joe Biden's saying at the moment, well, Donald Trump put certain timelines in place. It's never stopped any previous administration from overturning the bad decisions of their predecessor. And maybe this could have been handled better, to withdraw the army first and then leave civilians to be pulled out and then pretend that this was a great decision when you've had to send more troops in than you already had there in order to oversee the withdrawal. It seems like it was very much cart before the horse rather than horse before the cart here. I mean, what do you think, Kanthan?
I think that the outrage that we're currently seeing around the entire Afghanistan debacle is going to be forgotten by the time the next US presidential election comes around. So from that point of view, the net impact in terms of Joe Biden, I think, is going to be non-existent. We have short memories in terms of politics. And I don't think it's going to affect his administration in the long term. What I find significant about what's going on right now is that I think that there's going to be a fairly drastic realignment in terms of a number of people who have worked on the assumption that the United States would be there as a bulwark against other forces. So, for example, Taiwan, for example, if right now, if I was in the Taiwanese leadership, I would be incredibly nervous. Israel is another example. No matter the historical alliance between Israel and the United States, I'm pretty sure right now that the Israelis are actually quite nervous about what Biden is up to. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see the Bennett government actually falling and again being replaced by a Netanyahu government, just simply based on the fact that when the shit hits the fan, they want a hard bastard behind the controls that's actually steering the ship.
Well,
using that as an example, look across to, I think South Korea is going to also be looking very long and hard in terms of the fact that right now, a lot of their defense is based on the fact that they have U.S. troops on their territory. What happens if the U.S. suddenly decides abruptly to pull out from that space. So
By
I
the
do
way,
think
10 times the number of troops they had in Afghanistan. I think it's 25,000 troops are stationed in South Korea at the moment, and have been pretty much in those numbers or greater ones since the end of the Korean War. Afghanistan had, I think, 2,500 troops stationed there up to the moment that Joe Biden started the withdrawal. So if this is how America is treating its allies, do you agree that there are many of their allies that are going to be as uncomfortable and as nervous as Kanthan says they are? Lord Hain?
Well, there has been a breakdown in multilateralism that was, symbolized by Trump, and Trump just was America first. We've got that symbolized that, and Biden's, picked up some of that baggage. I'm not excusing him, but there's a bit of that in the psyche of American politics at the moment. You've got a very dangerous situation where you've got China first, and you've referred to Taiwan. You've got Russia first. You've then got other smaller players, but quite significant in their areas, like Erdogan, Turkey first. You've got Britain first. Forget about our place in Europe, and that was the motivation behind Brexit. So you've got a dangerous weakening of multilateralism and the international institutions that came out of the Second World War, including the United Nations Security Council, which is pretty impotent in all of this. And that's what I see as the danger of where the world is going. And you've seen it close at home, and Africa has been, including South Africa, a victim of this on the vaccination issue, where the richer countries, Britain at the top of the queue, has grabbed all the vaccines, and instead of recognizing that none of us are safe until all of us are safe with this pandemic. So I think, or whether it's climate change, you can't deal with the problems of the world unless you act in a concerted way, unless the international institutions of multilateralism are rescued from their impotence at the present time. So I think that's the backdrop to what's happened here, and the way America's likely to be behaving. And Kanthan made the point about Israel and so on. I think that's the backdrop. Until we start putting international institutions first and realize that we're actually stronger together than on our own, even America, then I think we're going to, face very turbulent times.
Well, thank you all three. Pums, you're on mute. I think if you wanted to say something.
Oh, yeah. I'm saying I think what it does do, which is something that a lot of people find it very unpalatable, and we're not talking about it, is the fact that the Taliban is now also emboldened as America withdraws. So the things that we hated about what the Taliban were doing in Afghanistan is going to come back stronger and harder, and they're emboldened, not only by historically the idea that Afghanistan is this graveyard of empires, which, as Kanthan talks to, all the allies of America are also going to start saying these guys are weak.
Yeah.
and I can't depend on these guys. They're going to be emboldened, and the things we hated about what was happening in Afghanistan is going to become more evident. It's going to be more in Afghanistan, but also in the surrounding countries. And that's the scary part.
I was really hoping that the three of you would bring a little optimism to our Thursday morning too, but I can't expect you to work miracles. So
how about some realism? Let's be real here.
I'm quite optimistic about this, Gareth, because I actually think that, and don't get me wrong, I'm very firmly in favor of multilateralism, but I do think that there has been a scenario for far too long where people have become complacent based specifically on their dependence on the United States. And I think that those relationships need to be reevaluated, and they need to be very coldly reevaluated. And they need to, and to a large extent, I can see a scenario where all of those players now turn around to the United States and say, yes, we want to return to a scenario where we're actually engaging on the basis of mutual self-interest, but there have to be rules in place that we are agreeing upon ahead of time. And we are not going to have a scenario where we're just going to assume that the US is the big brother that's going to be dictating the terms of engagement. I think that's a good thing. So, yeah, let's treat that as optimism.
I'm afraid at this point I'm going to have to call the party to an end. But Lord Hain, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on the new book, which I encourage everybody to take a look at. It's available.
And I'm
in good
certainly looking forward to seeing it.
Yes, absolutely. It's called A Pretoria Boy, the story of South Africa's public enemy number one, Lord Peter Hain. It's a great pleasure to have you on the show this morning, and thank you for being part of the Burning Platform.
Thank you very much for having me, and nice to meet Kanthan and Phumi as well.
Great to see you, sir. Thank you. And Phumi, Kanthan, good to have a little reunion with both of you. I'm sorry that we ran out of time to talk about all the things that we needed to discuss in politics, but I thought it was a great opportunity to have Peter Hain's comments on Afghanistan. And let's see what happens. I mean, there's never a dull week. And Kanthan, good luck for the upcoming birthday.
Well, I hope to see you there, Gareth.
Absolutely.
I mean, you are family after all.
No, we'll break some COVID rules, I'm sure. Very good.
Later,
and
guys.
because you don't work for the government, you're not going to get like a salary doc.
Exactly.
All right.
All right. Very good. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow at 6:00.